Welcome to the Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life radio show and podcast. I'm your host, Coach Myrna Young, and today I am speaking to a podcaster, Ginni Saraswati. Welcome, Ginni. How are you doing?
Thank you, Myrna. I feel like the pressure's on for me to sound like the golden tonsils because you introduced me as a podcast. I feel I've got to put on a voice and come out with like gold.
Well, you do, because wait till you read this bio of yours. Yeah, this bio is setting you up, boy. All right. Well, today, Ginni and I are going to talk about how to create and produce podcasts that entertain, empower, and engage audiences. So I hope that we can take this segment as something that podcasters should do. All right. So let me give you a little bit more information on Ginni. Ginni is an award-winning journalist known to stun many a personality with her quick-witted introductions and on-air antics. She left Paula Abdul in a laughing fit and Havana Brown choking with laughter. She has interviewed them all, from Katie Lang, Jennifer Beals, Rudy Rose, Martina Navratilova, and the list goes on. Her podcast, The Ginni Show, Curry, Comedy, and Connectivity, which invites listeners to follow the hilarious life of a young Sri Lankan gay immigrant woman growing up in Australia, with guest appearances from Ginni's aunties, 170 cousins, and celebrities. That should be fun. Ginni Media is a boutique podcast production company serving the visions of entrepreneurs, celebrities, and influential organizations around the world. Specializing in podcast production and content repurposing, they provide a concierge-style service to ensure your voice is literally being heard where it needs to be. Awesome. Well, listen, Ginni, I am going to, I enjoy talking to all my guests because, the guests that I bring on the show, not only is good for my audience because I hand select them, but I also learn from them. And today I intend to learn from you.
Oh, thank you. I'm sure I'll learn a thing or two from you as well, back to my radio roots. It's great.
Yeah. Love it. All right. So starting off, I always like to set up, so the audience can, connect with you and your journey and where you are right now in your career. So can you tell us your journey to becoming the host of the Ginni podcast? And give us a little bit of, I read it, your bio. I didn't read it today, but when I was reading and researching you, you've got a great radio story. So for all those people for all those radio personalities out there that are toiling, Ginni is an inspiration. So share with us.
Thank you, Myrna. That's very kind of you. So the radio story, well, it is an interesting one because I was in university, or as they say here in America, I was in college, my second year of college, and I was actually studying creative arts. So there's a big component of writing, of performance arts, theater, and cinema. So I kind of did everything but radio. And there was a radio station in Melbourne, which is the city I grew up in Australia. They had a course going for people who wanted to learn everything about radio. So the station was Joy 94.9, which is Australia's first and only LGBT radio station, and I think only one of 2 or 3 in the world, a full-time operating one anyway. So they were offering a course to learn, everything that you needed to do to, be in radio. I think it was like the official title of the course was Certificate 3 in Radio Broadcasting. So I thought, well, I've got film, I've got theater, maybe I'll just dabble into radio for a little bit. And I applied for the course, and, so gratefully I got in, and that's when my life changed, because I remember applying for the course, and, on the application it had, what would you like to do at Joy, and what would you like to do with your course? And I was more looking to do sort of producer type stuff. I didn't want to literally get behind the microphone. And even though I had done theatre and got in front of people and spoke and acted, I knew a couple of things, would change if I were to get behind the microphone. One, I was an LGBT radio station, so I wasn't completely out then, and I thought that this would automatically out me to everyone. So that was the fear that I had. The second thing was that there's a microphone that you have to talk to, and, unlike being in theatre or like being in film or that kind of thing, I wasn't playing a character. I was being me. Like, I had no script to go off. I was authentically being me. And even though I wasn't quite comfortable in who I am, I knew that radio was such, as it is now and as podcasting is now, it's such an intimate space because people generally listen to radio or podcasts on their own. It's not something that you go, hey, Friday night, my place, let's listen to a podcast.
That's true.
It's not like that. You listen like if you're listening to a radio or on an external device, it's within a meter away from you, or it's right in your ear. So it's a very intimate space. That's why it's so impactful, and that's why podcasting is so popular, because the ability to make an impact on that.
To be quite honest, it's blown up.
Absolutely, exactly. And everyone has a podcast because the great thing too is that you can, like what you're doing, Myrna, yourself, like you've got a radio show and you're repurposing it into a podcast, which is genius.
Yeah. So I repurposed it before it blew up. It's now blown up.
There you go. Yeah. Well, a lot of radio stations, when podcasts first came out, like when I was on radio, they repurposed some of the interviews we do on our morning show into a podcast, and that was very clever. And then your own podcast, like podcasts about anything, come out now. So that was kind of my journey into radio. And then from there, I realized too, using that point of FM stations or radio networks or shows like yours, Myrna, where you kind of take a part of the interview portion and you turn it into a podcast, I realized that from our statistics, our downloads were going up. So this kind of notion of people choosing when to listen to the interview, not necessarily in the morning, but to listening on their own time, and in order for them to manipulate time, there was this autonomy around time being built. And a lot of successful businesses have done well with that concept of on your own time, like the on-demand thing. I mean, Netflix has built a business on that. Amazon has. Uber has.
Apple.
So podcasting.
Even Apple is in it.
Exactly. Even Apple. It's there are a lot of successful businesses now that have done really well because of time, and I think that's where podcasting has the edge on vlogging and blogging, because you can.
And not only that, the reason a lot of people are getting into podcasts is because it's got a lot of money in it. And it has a lot of money in it because the advertisers are getting a lot back from that same thing that you just mentioned, the intimacy of the medium, right? People are listening to it, and when they're exercising or wherever, going to bed or whatever, so they're able to connect directly. And
absolutely.
And that's why everybody is flocking, because, if you're doing really well, you can make a lot of money.
Yes. Well, as you said about the intimacy factor too, like podcasting, because you can listen while you're doing something else, like the multitasking factor is quite high there. Like, I can go to the gym, listen. On my commute, I can listen. While I'm, walking to get my coffee, I can listen. And there is a statistic saying that affluent people, I think 51% of affluent people who have a college degree or like earn X amount of income a year, they will listen to podcasts. So it's people like that who value time.
Yes.
A lot of people want to be.
It's very true.
Type of demographic. Yeah, that wants to be targeted by companies. So that's why podcasts.
Yeah, because they're very educational. I mean, it's it's like the audio version of YouTube.
Exactly.
You want to learn something, you there's a podcast that can teach you whatever you want to learn, right?
Exactly.
So
right.
I mean, I like the story. I like the story about I like nice stories, but I like the part where you talked about how you got up at 4 a.m. and you worked all this time for no pay. Let's talk about that, because I identify with that a little bit.
So 4:30 in the morning, if you had a morning show in Australia, which started generally at 6 a.m. Sometimes we started at 6:30, depending when our year was. Like later on, we started at 6:30. But when I first got into morning radio, we started at 6. So I got up at 4:30. No matter what I had the night before, whether no matter if I had my day job or if I had my college degree, I'd always get up, because that's how much I love radio. And you know, this kind of journey to build a podcast production company and kind of build this freedom for myself and, you know, create a life that I love and, you know, everything kind of where I'm in control of my day and I'm not relying on my boss to sign off on my holidays, or if I'm late to something, you know, I'm not going to get yelled at. That anxiety is all gone, but it did take a good 10 years of hustle. You know, getting up early, staying back late. You know, the first time I got on air at Joy was I got the graveyard shift from 11 p.m. to 1 a.m., which means I was getting to bed like 2:30 to 3 a.m. And then on the reverse of that, I had to, when I got the morning show, I had to get up at 4:30 a.m. to make sure I was there to do the work. So it did take a lot of hard work, but you know, I had the luxury.
And no pay. Let's remember to put that one in.
Yeah, no pay. But I think nothing comes free. I don't think you can, you know, do anything like that. You can't build things up. It does take a lot of work and consistency. So yeah, that's how I got. I worked for free for 10 years, but you know, it was the most rewarding experience of my life. I got to meet amazing people and connections I made. So it's fantastic.
Well, that's the part of the inspirational part I wanted to get to, because that is absolutely amazing. Not too many people go that long, but I know that there's a lot of people. I mean, I just got turned on to what's his name, Mel Robbins, and she tells the story as well about working on radio for free and, you know, almost losing her house and losing all her, you know, whatever, because she wasn't making any money and her husband's business wasn't doing well and they almost lost everything. And I mean, she tells a powerful story. It's a very powerful story. And then she created that book, The 5-Second Rule. I don't know if you know about her, but when I was listening to her book, I'm like, you know, I'm listening while I'm, you know, I listen to podcasts or audiobooks when I'm walking. And I'm like, my mouth is wide open. So she also inspired me a little bit, too, because now she works for CNN and she's blown up.
Wow.
But we all have to hit that anvil, and we all have to put in the work, and we all have to lay the groundwork. You know, success takes a long time. Yep.
Yeah, I think working for free is seriously, in some places it's frowned upon, and in some places it's seriously underrated. If you can work for free, if you can exchange your time for somebody else's company or somebody else's industry that you want to get into, or if you want to surround yourselves with the people that you want to surround yourselves with, trading in your time to offer your services, the amount of knowledge that you're going to get in that X amount of time is going to be exponentially greater than, and I'm not putting down college degrees, but going into a university and reading a textbut on how it's done. I mean, that part helps too. I'm not saying it doesn't, but you.
Well, that's why in the olden days they had the apprenticeships. Same kind of thing. Exactly. You went on, you learned under a trade, and you didn't get any paid while you're learning. So yeah, very good. So that's an awesome start. I wanted to bridge the gap from 10 years in the radio to becoming a podcaster yourself and the Ginni Show.
Right. So as I was saying, kind of when I noticed the on-demand type situation where, you know, our downloads were getting exponentially higher week on week, and I'm thinking, okay, people are actually listening to us on our downloaded podcasts in real time. So I found that fascinating. So I knew that, you know, attention was going towards podcasts and the phone and this concept of listen on your own
what year
time.
was this?
So this was 2008, I noticed that that was happening. And then I took, like, even though I was still doing the radio show, I wasn't doing the morning show. I did like a specialty show. Then I came back to morning, and, you know, all these things happened, opportunities. I was kind of juggling a few balls, but I still did radio. But I wanted to start my own podcast because, one, again, the attention was going there, and secondly, I wanted that freedom to talk about what I wanted to talk about, because obviously with radio, as we were discussing shortly before we jumped on the call, Myrna, that, you know, that you've got to have a certain time frame to chat to. You need to sometimes talk about certain things. If you're regulated, if you're in kind of a regulated industry, you can't mention certain things. So there's a bit more freedom in a podcast, obviously, within reason. So that's when in 2016 I'm like, you know what, stuff it, I'm going to start a podcast. So since 2016 I've been making my own podcast, and from there that's how Ginni Media, my podcast production company, was born.
Very good. Awesome. Yeah, I now see what you're talking about, the knowledge that you learned in those 10 years, because now you can definitely use it. So that is awesome. That is great. So anybody that's listening that's, working hard at something and they're not seeing any fruit yet, just keep on building, keep on sowing seeds. At some point in time, it's going to grow into a forest. You're going to get it back. Yeah. I was listening to Joel Osteen this morning, and he's talking it can take a year, it can take 10 years, it can take 30 years. But, it happens, it happens. So that's awesome. All right. So the question I have here next is, you said that when you were, when you're offered to the radio on the LGB station, when you were offering the course, right? You didn't want, you thought about not wanting it to out you. So, so did you have the courage to introduce your sexuality on your show, even though it was, according to you, it was a criminalized act in your home country of Sri Lanka? So I know you're in Australia. So how did you get the courage to do that?
Well, I kind of lived a bit of a fragmented life then, Myrna. So my family, even though they knew I was doing radio, they weren't exactly aware that I was on a station called Joy 94.9, and that they were aware that I was on the station, but they didn't know that it was a gay station. So even sometimes my mum, who was such a supporter of me then, was like, I want to listen. And sometimes she listened to all, my show. I didn't mention anything specific to my sexuality. Sometimes I'm curious though, and I should. We've never actually had this conversation, but the sponsorship announcements they'd put in between were Greek and gay. Would you have it any other way? There'd be ads like that. My mother never questioned me about that. She kind of, she said, "Oh,
she thought it was just part of the show, right?" Right.
Yeah, she didn't question it at all. So she was great that way, or maybe she just tuned out when I wasn't talking. So it was fascinating that way. But so when I started on radio, I didn't naturally talk about my sexuality. It took me a while to build up to that. But I was slowly, being at the course at Joy, and obviously my class members in that course were also LGBT identifying. So that really did help me settle into my own skin in that way, while I was being on air and while I was doing that course as well.
So what was the fallout when they finally found out?
The fallout? What do you mean by fallout?
Your family, when I say fallout, I meant it's just an English word where, shit hit the fan, that kind of thing. You got that concept?
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Yeah, sorry. No, look, I think you're speaking US English. I've learned UK English, and I've quickly learned it's two different types of English. I think
yes, it is.
Yeah, so my family, how they found out was actually, about 6-7 years later when I was actually doing a TV segment. So I was actually out, about 23, I was pretty much, my sister knew and certain cousins of mine knew. I also was of that belief that I don't really feel the need to come out because I don't think it's necessarily something that needs to be announced. Because if you are in a heterosexual relationship, you don't sit your parents down.
You don't have to announce it, right? Yeah, right.
Mum, Dad, I'm dating a boy. You don't do that, right? So I hope to have a post-coming out world. So that's kind of why I didn't really need to do that, or feel the need to do that. But a few years later, I did a TV segment in Australia called Bent TV, and it was on Channel 31, which a lot of Sri Lankans watch. I'm Sri Lankan, being Sri Lankan born. But I didn't think they'd be watching it at 10 p.m. on a Monday night. I didn't think they'd be watching the gay program. So
wow.
my auntie and uncle were watching, on their Monday night as they do, and, they apparently saw me. And apparently I said, my name is Ginni and I'm a lesbian. I've never said that on radio, but clearly they heard what they wanted to hear. But the one question I had is, what were you doing watching gay TV on a Monday night? Answer that before you, I'm out, I'm here. But what were you doing watching that? Were you looking for something there? I was
exactly.
They dodged that bullet because they were hiding behind me going, but Virginia's gay. What were you doing watching TV? But Virginia's gay. One day I will get out of them. They probably have a secret stash of the L word or queer as folk somewhere, I bet you.
Wow. So what did your mom say or your dad say?
Well, my parents don't really, like, my mum unfortunately is in the early stages of Alzheimer's. So, she doesn't really mention it or talk about it, obviously. My dad also, like, doesn't really say much about it either. But, the people who know, know, and, it's just one of those things, again, I don't feel the need to declare it, and I don't also want to, enforce my gay on you, if that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah, so if my dad doesn't want to talk about it, he doesn't have to talk about
it. All right, so that's awesome. Well, this is a very entertaining start. I love it. So, all right, so let's go to our first break, and then we come back. We're going to talk about podcasting and content and how you can grow your business with a podcast. So I know you want to hear this. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Do you ever think that you have too much stuff? Maybe 2 or 3 of the same item, but don't have the one thing you need or want? Or maybe you spend hours getting ready to host a garage sale, only to have most of the things taken to charity anyway. Perhaps you have a service you'd like to offer in exchange for another service that you need. Or maybe just looking for one specific hard-to-find item, like sports memorabilia or auto parts. Well, BarterUpOnline.com can help you solve all of these problems. Whether you have unwanted items, looking for specific items, or simply willing to trade services, BarterUpOnline.com is for you. The process is easy. Come to our website, sign up for a monthly account, which will cost you $2 a month, billed once a month. Or sign up for an annual account, which will cost you $1 a month, billed once a year. Next, post as many items as you like on your barter page. Then, sit back and watch our back office help you find the people that are willing to trade. Yes, in no time, potential traders will be shopping on your barter page with no money. Want to tell your friends about your barter page, or maybe you're planning another garage sale? No problem. Simply send out your barter page email flyers or print your barter page business cards right from the website. Finally, a website that helps you trade something you don't want for something that you need, want, or can use. Go on and visit our website today. No money, no problem. Only trades.
Welcome back to the Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life radio show and podcast. I'm your host, Coach Marina Young, and today we are speaking to fellow radio personality, podcaster, Miss Ginni Saraswati. And Ginni was telling us of her introduction to podcast and how she got into radio and then into podcasting. So now we want to get on our topic. And our topic is, Ginni, can you tell anyone that's listening that wants to get into this podcasting world, how they can use the podcast to showcase their content and help build their client base?
Absolutely. So I guess there's a couple of things you kind of alluded to them, areas like podcasting. How can it bring value to your life, your brand, or your business? So there's a couple of aspects that you can look at this. One is to build your personal brand, or also it can be a source or a vehicle of extracting, or information or having valuable conversations. That's kind of one way of looking at it. So if you look at, the Tim Ferriss type podcasts or the Lewis Howes type podcasts, where they chat to different people and, there's habits or behaviors of those people that, are very valuable and has helped them succeed in life, you can extract that knowledge. And that might be just something you want to do with a podcast. You're like, hey, I want an excuse to chat to all these people. I have a podcast. A podcast is a great way to, build those relationships, because sometimes, you can't walk up to certain people and be like, hey, can I have a talk to you for 30 minutes? Having a podcast definitely gives you that leverage to do that. Whether it be to build your personal brand, as, people like Lewis Howes and Tim Ferriss have done as a result of a podcast, or it could be just a vehicle to build relationships. And then you've got the side of a podcast for your brand or business. Now, the interesting thing about this particular, concept of having a podcast for your brand or business is, I think a lot of businesses and brands kind of trip up or fail, and they don't execute the idea or a concept of a podcast properly, where they kind of like, all right, well, we sell beauty products. Let's just talk about this particular beauty product. what happens is essentially what you do is you turn that podcast into a 30-minute infomercial, which is not what you want. That doesn't bring any value to the listener. I mean, yes, you discuss the product, and yes, you give a good plug for that product or that manufacturer, but in terms of your audience and the people that you're targeting as a business, it doesn't really bring them much value. So I think if you want to start a podcast, the first place to start, and this is with anything I feel in life, is your why. What's your intention with the podcast? Do you want a podcast to have relationships? Do you want a podcast for people to get like a taste of what your brand or business does to the world? Do you want a podcast to, purely as a personal growth tool? Really start there and really think about who this podcast is for with your why. I think businesses kind of jump the gun, all right, we're going to do a podcast about our 10 best products, and they kind of don't think about their audience and who's listening to it. It's like, okay, this is just a media stream for us. This will replace our advertising. It doesn't quite work that way.
Okay. Yes, I love it. Now, and you mentioned, two of my, well, I bounce around a lot, but there's a time I was listening to Lewis House religiously, try to kind of copy some of his format because I love the way he interviews, and my podcast is kind of, based in, some of the things. And then Tim Ferriss, obviously, the 5-minute, was it the 4-hour work week? Right. So he's got some good stuff, and I've listened to him as well. But, I listen to them, and then there's millions around, so I bounce around a lot.
Right.
But, yeah. But I think that the most popular podcasts, because they send me all these lists. For instance, I just got the top 5 podcast list came into my email yesterday, and everybody is talking about a specific niche. You know what I mean?
Right.
And they're teaching something, and that's why it's doing really well, because it's not interview style like I'm doing, or like Lewis House or Tim Ferriss or whatever. We're speaking to thought leaders, and we're speaking to coaches and thought leaders and authors, or somebody who's got somebody to share to help you improve your life. The top podcasts are usually, let's say if you want to learn cooking, or you want to learn marketing, or you want to learn SEO, or you know what I mean? They seem to be specific to, in fact, one of the newest podcasts, I don't remember the names of it, but one of the newest podcasts that I've seen that's doing really well, this guy is talking to businesses who have started and, I don't know, got $1 million or something. So he's talking to, and people are going to listen to that because they want to know how to start their business and get to $1 million. So that's, you know what I mean? So what format do you say that fits into? Is that like a personal brand or what is that?
Okay, so that in a sense of how do you get to the $1 million? So you're kind of unpacking the mindsets and the behaviors and the strategies to get to that.
Right.
So that would be
exactly.
Yep. Yeah. So that would be a combination of both. Like he's obviously selling what has worked for him.
Right.
For example, Gary Vaynerchuk is a good example of that, where he kind of talks about entrepreneurship.
I thought of him a minute ago. I didn't remember his name, but yes, he's perfect. Yeah. Example.
He's perfect.
Right.
So he's a perfect example because he creates content. He's a machine, and he does an amazing job at it as well. But in this particular case, it would be a conversation of how he applies strategy. So how this particular, I forget the person's name that you mentioned, but how this particular person does it is obviously unique to their style. But in a situation like that, where you're unpacking the mindsets, the strategies, the tools, the resources that this particular person used, it's just interesting. I would actually probably say an interview style is good. And obviously in an interview style is great because it's conversational, it's natural, it doesn't sound too robotic, it encourages the organic flow of conversation. But, there is an educational component to that as well. It doesn't have to be like, hello, I'm a teacher and this is a blackboard and this is what I will write about this particular strategy. It doesn't have to be that way. But if you are doing like a solo podcast where there's only you talking, figure out like one trick I tell my clients is, because they're like, oh, Ginni, I sound like I'm reading something when I'm doing this podcast. I said, call me or call a friend on the phone and put them on mute so you're aware that someone's listening to you. And as soon as that light goes off in your brain, you will find that their tone of voice will change because you're aware that someone is listening to you. If you're recording and there's no one there, if there's no one there, you're very likely to be a little bit more rigid. But as soon as you're aware that someone is listening, the tone of voice will change and how you deliver what you're about to deliver will change as well.
That's true, because I've also listened to, because I'm a coach, and I do a couple of coaching segments. I don't do too many of them because I have all these guests, but my plan was to do one a month. And you're right, when you're talking for like 30 minutes by yourself, it's a little different. You have to make it entertaining, whatever. So I've listened to some podcasts where somebody is, they're not interviewing, they're just talking, and I try to see how they do it as well, how to make it entertaining. So which kind of, branches to my next question. That's something that you are good at. So how can podcasters, if you're doing an interview, it's easy to be, unless you're funny. Again, a lot of the, Ron Burgundy is one of the newest ones on podcasting. And, he's just funny. I listened to one of his podcasts. Because, people know that I'm a podcaster, and I get all this stuff through my email. And I heard him, Ron Burgundy's got the new podcast, and I started listening to him, and he's on there like, okay, are we started? I'm in the shower. They're saying, well, no, we're on the air. And he's just an idiot. He's entertaining. You know what I mean? So unless you're funny, right, and you can pull it off, right? But other than that, for us, mortals that are not comedians, so how do we produce podcasts that entertain, empower, and engage our audiences? Whether we're doing it interview style or are we just doing a monologue?
So when you talk about the interview style and monologue, we're hitting towards the show format. So that can come a little bit later. That's kind of getting a little bit ahead in terms of the planning scope. But I would actually go 2 steps back. So, you've got your why, you've established why you're doing the podcast and what you're doing it for. The second thing I would look at is you. Now, people say to me, I want a podcast like Joe Rogan. I want a podcast like Ron, what's his name? Ron
Burgundy, right.
Ron Burgundy. I want a podcast like Lewis Howes. Now, the reason why Lewis, Ron, and Oprah and Joe Rogan, why they're so successful, and this is going to sound cliched, but it's the truth, is because Joe Rogan is no other than Joe Rogan. He is completely himself. Gary Vaynerchuk, great example. Gary Vaynerchuk is Gary Vaynerchuk to the point where he curses every third word. And he is doing a channel now called Curse Free Gary, which he's empathetic to his listeners. So that's great too. I think you've got to come back to, I think people think they have to be a certain way when the microphone's on. They have to be funny. They have to put on their radio voice. They have to be a certain way. You don't have to do that because, funnily enough, it's going to come through because if you're consistently putting out content, there's going to be some form of I guess there is some form of showmanship sometimes, but there is going to be a disconnect there where it sounds a little forced. So I think go back to you, what makes you unique, and to the point where there's this exercise that I do in one of my free ebooks where you should list what are your skills. So what are you good at? Like what are your skills? What are you good at? You're a good coach. What do you unpack mindset? So
I've got a good personality and I've got a lot of energy, and so that's why I make sure that it's when I'm interviewing, there's a lot of laughter and there's a lot of fun. Just something like you talked about, how you had, who was it? Who was it that you had in Stitches? Paula Abdul, that kind of thing. I try to, I'm good at the conversation. One of the reasons that I think that I'm a great interviewer is because I'm a coach and I'm accustomed to listening well and being truly present with my guests. So we have a really nice dialogue. And then I bring the energy up and I have fun and things like that. And even when I'm doing a monologue, I try to be entertaining. but I am no Ron Burgundy or I'm no Kevin Hart, because he too has got a radio show or something. You know what I mean? I'm not sure if it's a podcast, but he's definitely on the radio. You know what I mean? Those guys are naturally funny. They can blink and they're funny.
Well, Kevin Hart is funny because he is a trained comedian. Like that's why he's funny. So I think that you are Myrna Young, and you've just listed the things that you are good at. You got good energy. You know, you provide value to your clients. All those things. So think about this is what I get my clients to do. Call 5 people in your life or email them or whatnot, Myrna, and ask them what are 5 things about you that they think that you're good at, that you're skilled at, and 5 things about you that they value. So it could be like, you know, I value the fact that you're such a good friend, or I value the fact that, you know, I see that you're a hard worker. So ask 5 different types of people. So don't always ask your nearest and dearest, because they're going to tell you, they're going to inflate your ego, but ask people in your life, from your neighbors who see those different sides of you. Ask them to tell you those 5 things that they value about you, and 5 things they think that you're skilled at. And you'll kind of see, like, if you don't have a sense of, some people don't, they kind of have blind spots to their own self and that kind of thing. But if you have those blind spots to self-awareness, that's a great place to start. You know, ask those people in your life, your colleagues, your neighbors, your peers, your friends, your family. Ask them those 5 things they think of when they think of you. Like, you know, I did this exercise, and, you know, there's similar answers. Like my friend said, you know, I'm very giving and I'm friendly and bubbly and all those things. There were similarities, but everyone saw me really uniquely. Like, they explained it very unique to them. So, you know, that is a great exercise to start with if you want to kind of find your groove in terms of what kind of podcast you want to do.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I did that. I think I didn't ask 5 people, but I asked my daughter and I asked my husband. And one of the things that my husband said was really great, and it was very true, and it's given me some confidence, because he said, I can talk on any subject, and I love that. I love that, because as a podcaster, every single my goodness, hang on, frog in my throat, 1 second. Every single guest that I have on the show, I can communicate with what they're talking about. If they're talking about, there's only one guest I ever had on the show, and he was talking about radionics, which is, you know, a subject I've never heard of, and I went and I studied it. Or, so that's one of the things that he said is my strength, and it's actually true, which makes me a great host for a podcaster, because I can get into the conversation and make it interesting. So I love that.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll ask 3 more. 3 more people. I only asked 2. Right. Okay. So that's awesome. So what you're saying then, that the way the podcasters can entertain and empower and engage their audiences is just by being who they are and tapping into who they are. Right. That's true. Be authentic.
It starts with that.
Right.
Yeah. Be also, you like we were saying before, it's such an intimate space. You know, when you live with, like, you know this, you're married, Myrna, your husband, you know him intimately, he can't fake it. Like, he can be, if he's not a bubbly person, you see over time that he's not a bubbly person. It's such an intimate space. It's one of the perks of getting to know people intimately, and podcasting, unfortunately, comes with the same thing. Yeah.
And it's really interesting that you should bring up Gary Vaynerchuk, but he is an amazing person. I don't follow a lot of him, but I mean, he's on LinkedIn a lot. That's his medium. So I, you know, once in a while, even this morning, I was listening to a post. But I think that I heard him on a podcast, or I read his book or something. But what he was saying, that the reason that he becomes so popular is when he was doing his show on wines, and he would have the camera follow him around, and he would do unedited versions because he wanted people to see that he was real. And that's actually what made him popular, because he didn't edit it out. If they messed up, you know, he wanted to show it as it is. And, you know, a lot of the YouTubers or the people that are doing that kind of thing, and I've heard that works. That's why reality shows became popular, but we know they're staged. But the concept is what people think. Yeah, people want to think that it's real, and you're letting it all hang out there, and the cameras are always going to be rolling. But that's how Gary Vaynerchuk became famous, because he just You just say, well, this is who I am, and this is me, and there's no filter, and that's good. So yeah, well, I think I'm there. I think that I'm myself, because that's basically the type of person I am. I'm I don't put on airs. What you see is what you get. So that's great. So I'm doing the right thing then, huh?
Well, yes, if you're on that kind of pathway to self-awareness, Myrna, you're doing a great job.
Yeah, well, thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Well, let's take our second break. And when we come back, Ginni is going to tell us how to get in touch with her if you wanted to work with her podcast production company, or where you can listen to her the Ginni Show. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Do you ever think that you have too much stuff? Maybe 2 or 3 of the same item, but don't have the one thing you need or want? Or maybe you spend hours getting ready to host a garage sale, only to have most of the things taken to charity anyway. Perhaps you have a service you'd like to offer in exchange for another service that you need. Or maybe just looking for one specific hard-to-find item, like sports memorabilia or auto parts. Well, BarterUpOnline.com can help you solve all of these problems. Whether you have unwanted items, looking for specific items, or simply willing to trade services, BarterUpOnline.com is for you. The process is easy. Come to our website, sign up for a monthly account, which will cost you $2 a month, billed once a month, or sign up for an annual account, which will cost you $1 a month, billed once a year. Next, post as many items as you like on your barter page. Then, sit back and watch our back office help you find the people that are willing to trade. Yes, in no time, potential traders will be shopping on your barter page with no money. Want to tell your friends about your barter page, or maybe you're planning another garage sale? No problem. Simply send out your barter page email flyers or print your barter page business cards right from the website. Finally, a website that helps you trade something you don't want for something that you need, want, or can use. Go on and visit our website today. No money, no problem. Only trades.
Welcome back to the Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life radio show and podcast. I'm your host, Coach Myrna Young, and today we've had a very interesting and lively and engaging conversation with Ginni Saraswati. I think I'm messing up your name. Say it properly, Ginni.
Saraswati. It's all good. It's better than you messing up Ginni, because sometimes people say Ginni, and that's far worse.
I know. I think I started off saying it right, and then by the third time I'm like messed it up totally. So that's awesome. All right. So Ginni, we've got a few minutes left. So tell our audience a little bit about your show. I mean, what you talk about on there, and how they can, I mean, I'm pretty sure it's in iTunes, but, where they can download it. And then talk a little bit of what kind of services you offer podcasters as far as production.
Absolutely. So the Ginni Show is, it's on hiatus at the moment, but it is coming back soon. It's a podcast about unpacking your happy. Now, what I mean by that is everyone that I speak to, everything that I talk about is reverse engineering what happiness is. So, to everyone, happiness is very personal. For you, Myrna, happiness might be, doing a podcast every day and going home to your husband and your child, and that's your definition of happiness. Mine might be being surrounded by, copious amounts of cups of coffee. That might be my version of happiness. So we kind of unpack people's personal happy, and we get people to really define kind of happiness, because I think there's a preconceived notion of what happiness is, and people are not so happy in their lives because they don't really understand that they're not aligned with that preconceived notion of happiness. So that's what the Ginni Show is about. And there's also a bit of comedy in there, and some anecdotal narratives about my life, which I put in. I do a few skits with my aunties, not with my aunties. They'd kill me if they were on the show. But so I do some skits with my aunties. And then I guess Ginni Media is the podcast production company that I've created off the back of the success of the Ginni Show. When I launched the Ginni Show, it was lucky enough to be nominated for 2 awards at the Australian Podcast Awards, and also the Australian LGBTI Awards. So I was very grateful for that. And after that happened, I had people approach me saying, "Hey, podcasting sounds amazing. Can you show me how to do that?" And that's that's how Ginni Media was born. Like I've been helping people produce podcasts since that time. So, if you want to get in touch with, Ginni Media, it's ginnimedia.com. I have some free resources there on my site. Is a 19-page ebook, which is free. It's worth about $500, but I'm giving it away for free because it's got everything that you need to know to launch your own podcast. You can walk away after reading that, and you'll have everything you need to know to launch one. So there's that. There's how to be the best podcast guest. There's some resources there as well that you guys can utilize. There's a checklist. Everything. I love podcasting. It's my oxygen. So, that's how you can get in touch with me.
Wow, I love that word. Well, yeah, I mean, it conjures up so much when you say it's your oxygen. It's a beautiful analogy. Love it.
It is my
love
oxygen.
it. Yes. Well, it's really interesting, I'm going to do full disclosure here. Again, I'm doing this stuff for free, the radio and the podcast, and so sometimes I'm saying, well, I could be doing something else with my time and making money. But then the other day I came to the conclusion, I said, you know what? If I were to stop doing this, I would have no purpose.
Yeah. Right
and
yeah.
it's beautiful. And I'm thinking, wow, this is my purpose. This is my happiness.
It is.
Helping people to, transform their lives and have good content. So yeah, and God will reward me at some point.
Yeah.
So that's basically how I believe. I love that. So let me circle back. So it's Ginni Media, and that's GINNIMEDIA.com. So on the ebook, do you talk about marketing or just launching?
Launching. So everything that you need to do to launch your podcast is on that. But there is also a free ebook on repurposing content as well. Like if you go to ginnimedia.com/resources, there's about 4 ebooks and a checklist there that you can download.
Oh, wow. Nice. Resources. Got it. Okay. So, yeah, that's good because, launching the podcast is great, but then you got to get people to listen to it.
Absolutely.
So the marketing is an integral part of any business anyway. Marketing is the blood of a business. If you don't have marketing, the business will die. It will close up shop. And if you don't have people listening to your podcast, it's the same thing. It'll die. So that is awesome. Really enjoyed our conversation, Ginni. I want to thank you for coming on the Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life radio show and share with us the medium of podcasting and radio, and how people like ourselves love what we do. We do it for free because we are tagged to help people to move forward in their lives, and that's why we do it. So I appreciate that we're in the same space. We have the same purpose, and thank you for sharing your vision with the audience. And like I said, because podcasting is blowing up and everybody's doing it, I'm pretty sure that's somebody that's listening might or a few people that might want to get into it, and they can use your help, whether it's to produce it for them or to tap your resources that you're offering for free. So that's great. So appreciate that. So thank you. So as we wrap up, I want to thank you guys for all tuning in. You can pick up, if you're not listening on the radio, at WDJY 99.1 FM. So if you're not listening on there, then you are listening on the podcast. So remember to subscribe. So the podcast is now on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, Castbox, Podbean. It's on all the podcasts, so players. So subscribe to whichever one that you prefer, so that you can be inspired every week, so that you can live your best lives now. All right. Any parting comments, Ginni?
No, continue to rock on, Myrna. You're doing an awesome job. It's just one foot in front of the other every single day, and as you said, the rest will come.
Yes, well, thank you. Same to you too. So, I wish you all the best in your on your journey. And yeah, get your podcast back up, because unpacking your happy is a beautiful thing. Beautiful thing. Because
you.
a lot of people don't know how to be happy. So yeah, they're thinking that happiness is one thing, and it's not. So that's beautiful. All right. So until next time. Namaste.